Hello, welcome. It's Tuesday at 2 o'clock. It is Transformation Tuesday time. So if this is your first time joining me, please introduce yourself in the comments. I would love to meet you. I'm Stephanie Doyer. If this is not your first time catching me live, then say hello, let me know you are here. And if you catch this on the replay, let me know that you saw it. And also, I'm looking forward to hearing about your transformational moments. So last week was the first Transformation Tuesday where I shared a dream that I had had when I was a young girl, about 8 years old, anywhere between 8 and 12. I honestly can't remember what specific age it was, but it was about that time. And I'll get into a little bit more about that today. So I also had challenged you to think back to when you had had moments of transformation in your life, whether you recognized it as a moment of transformation then or not. Because in hindsight, things can become so much clearer, right? The morning after I had had that dream, I would have never been able to tell you what it meant or what it could have meant or what it could have represented in my life. But in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. So I challenged you to think about those moments of transformation for yourself. And I invited you to share those with me. And I invite you to share them with me today and anytime moving forward. If you have not seen that video, if you don't know about that dream, then that video is posted. You can go back and you can watch it for reference, and it kind of might make sense with some of the things that I talk about and share with you today. So let's kind of go back to that first time. So that dream, the purple sky dream, something else that had gone on about the exact same time frame was this. So we had some neighbors that moved in next door to us. And from all outward appearance, people would have said that they were religious people. And in context of what that means today, that would mean something like very, very rigid, very narrow-minded, not very genuine, not very kind. But that is exactly what these people were. They were very kind. They were very open-minded. They were very relational. They were very intentional about building relationships. And while the heart of everything they did was to share God's love with people, it was never condescending and it was never shameful. It was always an inviting conversation. It was always a reminder that you were loved and he was there. So one afternoon, and they had a daughter that was very similar to my age, maybe 1 or 2 years younger. Well, one afternoon I was over there playing at their house, and the mom, she sat me down and we had a very lovely conversation. And she asked me what I believed and what would happen if I die, and did I know what would happen if I die, and did I want to know what would happen if I were to die? And up until that point, I would have said, yeah, I know what this is. I know what I believe, and I know what's going to happen. But as she was saying it, there was just this little question of if I really did or not. And so she led me through a prayer. It was the prayer, and it was probably a prayer that you have prayed and or that you are very well aware of. But I will say something about this. As I was saying that prayer, now mind you, I had grown up going to a specific denomination of a church. And so I was very familiar with what church was all about and the conversations that were talked about in church, the conversations that were not talked about in church. So I thought I knew where she was going with this. And I will say this. As I prayed that prayer, something physiologically different happened within my body. I felt lighter, I felt cleaner, and I felt new. And the best way I can describe it was after praying that prayer, immediately after praying that prayer, I felt as if my heart was sparkling. And as I went home later that afternoon, I felt as if I was walking on air. Again, I felt clean and I felt new and I felt like I was sparkling from the inside out. Now, keep in mind, that was I was 8 years old. And if you've watched that past video and or you go back and watch it, I couldn't tell you what came first. I couldn't tell you if the dream came first or if the prayer came first. And I don't really know that it matters, because what it did happen was it planted the seed inside my heart. Now, what happened over the next several years? Nothing. Nothing. So at that moment, something was different inside of me, and I could have told you exactly. I felt sparkling and I felt new. But after that, nothing really happened. That feeling faded away. The days passed and nothing major happened. And if you knew me going to school, high school, junior high, college, like, you would not, there wasn't anything specific about my life that you would have been like, oh, she's a Christian. Oh, she believes in Jesus. Oh, she goes to church. There's nothing about my life that would have made you think that. Had you asked me at that time, I would have said I was a Christian, but not because I knew nothing because I knew what it meant, not because I knew what it looked like, not because I knew what I was doing. It's just the fact that we went to church a couple times a year. We would get on track. We would do really, really well for a while, and then we'd fall off the wagon and we stopped going. And then we would get back on it again, and then we would fall off again. And this isn't to say anything about, the way I grew up, but it was just a fact of life. I think that's very normal for a lot of people. You get into a habit and then you fall off. You get into a habit or something happens. You get into a season of life where there's just too much going on, and or there's other outside things that pull at you that need your attention, that you don't have the time, you don't have the energy, and you just don't make it. And that happened on and off. Growing up, I would go to church with my best friend every so often, but it wasn't something that was consistent. It wasn't something that was, how should I say this? It wasn't something that was a priority by any means, by any way, shape, or form. So those are two moments that happened: the purple sky dream and that prayer when I was about 8 to 12 years old. And then there's another transformational moment that happened about 12 years later. If we're picking 8 as that age point, about 12 years later was the next most transformational moment in my life. And that would be what kicked off everything else to actually living a different life, to actually living a transformed life. So what is this moment? So when I was in college, when I was about 20 years old, somebody that I loved passed away. And keep in mind, I just told you there was nothing in my life that anybody would have said, oh yes, that girl knows God, loves God, has a relationship, has been transformed from the inside out. There's nothing about me that would have said that. But there were several months leading up to that where I had been having lots of conversations with friends of mine who you could say that about. And then this tragedy happened, and somebody that I loved passed away. And I went to the funeral. And I remember I was asleep on the couch, and I woke up, and it was as if that call was there. And I can remember it just like it was yesterday. God was saying to me that it was time for me to make him a part of my life. And when you're in those moments where you feel like emotionally, mentally, you have been turned inside out because of something tragic, and then when you have that calm presence of leadership that's gentle and kind and inviting, you take it. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. And I did. I remember I went back to sleep, and the next day, or even the day after that, if it wasn't the next day, it was the day after, I got a Bible, and here's what changed my life. It wasn't the fact that I had the Bible. It wasn't the fact that I heard that voice or I had that call and that pull in my spirit. It was the fact that I opened that book and I started reading it for myself. Now keep in mind, I wasn't actively involved in any denomination of a church. There were maybe 3 different denominations, totally different denominations, teaching totally different things that I had been hit and miss throughout my entire childhood, basically. But the moment I got that book and I started reading it for myself, that is when transformation happened in my life, again, from the inside out. I've never, again, had that experience of feeling that clean and sparkling as I did when I was younger, when I prayed that prayer. But I have had moments, and we will talk about those, right? This is a transformation moment Tuesday. I will share more of those with you. But again, I want to ask you, and I want to invite you to look at your own life and to ask yourself, where have I had moments of transformation, whether I knew it at the time or not? And when I was 20 years old and I had that moment where I woke up in the middle of the night and I had that feeling, that calling in my spirit, I knew it. I knew it was a transformational moment. Part of because when I said yes in that moment, like, yes, okay, there was that peace, there was that calmness, and I was able to go back to sleep. I wasn't tossing and turning. I wasn't overcome with grief. When you're overcome with grief, you wake up in the middle of the night and it kind of hits you all over again, right? That was gone. I was able to get a decent night's sleep for that night. And again, like I said, it was what came after that, the going to get the book, and then the picking it up and the reading it on my own, day in, day out, being intentional to show up because I needed answers. So I want to just, in addition to asking you when and where you've had those moments, asking you when the last time you had that moment was, and regardless of the time span, to just be okay and to be at peace with, if you've had that moment, another one is coming. And it's okay to ask for it. There was nothing that I was doing in my life when I had that second transformational moment of waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like God was calling me to himself. There was nothing I was doing in my life that would have been worthy of, or what's the word I'm looking for? That would have been like, oh yes, this is something that I want. This is something that I believe is for me and or possible, or I didn't even really know or care if I was living my life in any sort of up and right, on the narrow path in any way, shape, or form. There have been some conversations that have been happening with my friends, but nothing that was really creating anything in me to want to pursue that further until that tragedy happened. And I was woken up in the middle of the night and I was given an invitation and I accepted the invitation, and my life has never been the same since. And there are people that I knew at that time of my life that will tell me I am not the same person after that tragedy than I was before that tragedy. And I can pinpoint it back to that night when I woke up. But after I had 1 year left of college, and that was the best year of college ever. I wish I had done my entire college experience that way. Lots of leadership opportunities, lots of just a completely different perspective of college. And it was amazing. And after college, that's when I had people say, you are not the same person. Like after that last year, people go that, they go their own ways. They do their own thing. And you kind of keep in touch with some, and then some you don't. And then the ones you kind of stay in touch with, they were saying, you're not the same person. And that was the point. I wasn't supposed to be the same person. In my stories, I posted about having one-to-one moments with your creator, one-to-one moments where you are listening to his voice and you are hearing the voice of the lover of your soul. That is a transformational moment. Those are tiny little moments that build and build and build until you are a different person. So, you have the same challenge before you this week. Where have there been moments of transformation in your life? Can you pinpoint it? Can you pinpoint a difference after that moment from before that moment? And if you can, I would love to know. I would love to hear it. I would love for you to share that with me. It's affirming. It's encouraging. It shows a pattern. It shows a pattern of somebody else's behavior and what their intentions are, what his intentions are for you. And you can share those moments. So I would encourage you to look at that again today. And if you haven't seen that video, one more context about the Purple Sky video, best dream I've ever had in my entire life. Hands down. And I've had some pretty good dreams. And we'll share those And I'll share those with you in the upcoming weeks. So again, this is your moment, your Tuesday at 2 o'clock moment of transformation. I think it's important in the middle of a day, at the beginning of a week, the middle of a week, just to pause and to ask yourself what those moments have been. Recapture that feeling, recapture the mindset, recapture that shift that happened inside, and to hold on to that, and to do that often, to intentionally recapture that moment and to recapture those feelings often. And then I think what will happen is you will see that those moments happen more frequently. The more you're intentional about it and the more you're more mindful and you're more aware of it, you'll see that they happen more. So I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Again, please share your moments with me. I would love to hear them. And I will see you again next week.